Good afternoon and welcome to the latest Blackboard clinic. Today we'll be going over adaptive release and using that inside of Blackboard in your course. Now we'll also cover why and how to use adaptive release and what rules you have available and provide some examples. So let's begin. So the adaptive release are a set of options in any content item made in a content area that allows you to select limitations for the students, or not limitations, or certain restrictions or requirements that the student must accomplish before they're able to see the item. The first option is dates, which we won't really get into since we normally recommend that you use the display after and display until date available within the basic settings of every item. Next thing, you'll have membership, which we'll touch on in a moment. But in this section, you can click on any member of your student roster and select them to be able to see that specific item if you want to. The third option will be grades, which lets you select a specific column or assignment that would be required to have been completed before the next assignment is able to open up, or before they see another lecture material or test feedback, etc. And lastly is the review status, which would require that a student mark the item as reviewed, before they're able to proceed with the item that's actually requiring this review status. So, for example, I will go ahead and grab a person from a group that already exists and the people that are in it. I'll also choose just a random person in my roster. These are all fake or staff members, so there's no actual students enrolled in this class. Next, I can make a requirement that the student must complete a syllabus quiz or some sort of assignment before they can continue, right? So I'm going to do the syllabus quiz, and they have to score less than or equal to 20. I'm going to make that 20%. Okay, less than or equal to 20%. So the bar is very low for this one specific item. So when I click submit, this specific folder will have an adaptive release that requires that a student from group test 1 or Fernandez MA is able to see it. That also requires them that they complete an assignment, the syllabus quiz, for 20% or less. You can, now it's crucial that understanding these rules in order to apply them effectively, as it can confuse students if you don't notify them in the syllabus, or you don't make that part of their experience when they first start going to the class. They will fail to notice why something is missing, and maybe the specific adaptive release requires them to look at the syllabus and just mark it for review. Something as easy as that can be missed if it's not included in documentation like the syllabus, and therefore the student will go into this learning materials area and they'll be unable to continue, not knowing what is keeping them from accessing this material. So it's very important that you are clear with your students as to how to accomplish this. So after you are clear with your students as to how this course will be approached, either in a structured way that requires the specific progression, week 1, week 2, week 3, or it requires you to complete a certain assignment at a high grade or a high bar of understanding and be that demonstrated in their grade point value, then they'll have access to the next set of instructional materials and folder. However you choose to make that available, it will be important to make it clear to your students. So I will go through the overview through the different rules in detail, and then also look at the advanced adaptive release and if we can create more, how we can create more complicated rules and how they would work, and then look at examples of how this could be implemented. So going into week 2, as we did on the first folder, we click on the basic adaptive release and choose some options. So I'm going to choose for this assignment, I'm going to choose a requirement that the student complete some sort of discussion, right? So without the discussion, and this thing is worth 15 points. So without a discussion and a percent score greater than or equal of 10 of, sorry, that would be like 75%. So anything greater than or equal to 75% of 15 would be deemed acceptable and would meet the requirement in order to be able to see this folder. So I'm going to go ahead and click submit. Now, let's say you want to add another requirement. You can go to Adaptive Release Advanced, which is the second option. So it's Adaptive Release and then Adaptive Release Advanced, and create additional sets of rules that go on top of this one. So I go to create a rule. I name it Rule 2 and click Submit. So now it's going to ask me what sort of criteria do I want this to include. So I'm going to make it a review status. And I want the student to be able to see week 2 if the student has reviewed lessons 2 through 4. And I'm going to go ahead and click submit. So now we have settings in the Adaptive Release Advanced, and we'll go back to the OK area in order to look at them better. And we're going to have 2 rules. The student has met a 75% or greater score in the discussion board, and they've also reviewed the lessons for the first week. Having done that, then the folder for week 2 will open, be made available, and the student can continue with the rest of the material. So I'll go back to OK, and I'll see learning materials and week 2. One moment. Week 2 now has an adaptive release. An adaptive release that is different. So with that said, it might be a good idea to have this written down or planned out in advance, so you're not using requirements of things that haven't been made available yet, or things that would be too difficult to accomplish, or combining 2 items that are at odds with each other. Like you can't have, if the person's only in group 2, you can assign only group 1 to an entire folder, unless that's the objective. So that's some ways to use adaptive release. And if you are stuck at any point, you're always more than welcome to come by and talk to us face to face or give us a call. So let's go through some examples. So what I want to do, I have a blank page. For the sake of this example, I'm going to call this test feedback. Test feedback. And I'm going to call this for students of 90 to 100. I'm going to click submit. I'm going to create a couple more. I'm going to go ahead and create a couple more blank pages. So bear with me. Test feedback. 70 to 90%. right? And then one more for anything lower than 70. Now, you don't have to say 70% or lower. Um, this could be poor performance. This could be average performance. You could call this excellent, excellent score rather than that, because you might not want to hurt their feelings. But the point is, you now have several feedback options. So I can, using the adaptive release, select what sort of information I provide to students. So with that done, I have an exam. Let me take a look for that. I have a chapter exam. Chapters 5 through 8. That's worth 150 points. I'm going to choose a score of greater than or equal to 90. So that meets the first requirement for this blank page. I have test feedback that it would be considered test feedback for anybody of 90 to 100 in their score, right? I could do the same thing here. Sorry, I clicked the wrong link. I could do the same thing in adaptive release and select, once again, select the same assignment, chapters 5 through 8. This time, I'm going to do less than or equal to 89. You notice I might have not clicked something correctly, so now I have to go back and double check. So see, there's a thing with grades where your basic default condition is that the student has at least an attempt in the item. And you have to make sure to bubble in percentage or score and choose the one that works for you. So there's actually an even better option where I can just select between 70 and 89.9999%. It's actually better than the other option, which is it says score must be a number. Just gonna do 89, see if that works. Okay, so it's actually better than the feedback option I had initially selected. So let me go back to this and choose. I mean, they both, either one works in this case. I could do 90 to 100. Or I could just do greater than or equal to 90. Either one is perfectly fine, but making sure that you are using the correct one can make the difference between your students not seeing the material whatsoever or seeing the wrong type of options, that seeing the wrong type of feedback or the wrong type of content. So we're going to go with a percent range between 90 and 100 for this case, and click submit. So now I have test feedback. So imagine this had anything from just a good job, well done, keep doing what you're doing, or for something like a 70 to 90%, you might have a little more involved message to your students. It could even be what subjects they missed. So this could be a week later after you've looked at the grades and reviewed what questions that were most missed. You could target the students that are 70 to 90% and say they miss so this is chapters 5 through 8. We initially did that on the quiz. So if we're looking at quizzes for chapters 5 through 8, and say hypothetically all the questions that were missed were mostly from chapter 7. So now you can have a reviewer for chapter 7 tell them, like, look, you missed this chapter, go back and review. And that will do a great deal of help for the student to have that targeted material come in, and everybody else doesn't have to see that, and it feels tailored to the student. It does require some preparation, but tailoring this to the student's needs will help the student and will help you properly, maintain some retention and do some efficiency in terms of feedback for students. The same thing can apply for graded writing assignments. If the vast majority of your students that did didn't do so well are lacking in a specific area like organization structure, grammar, citations, you could have them, you could find a feedback resource that has great information on any of those subjects and make that available only for them. It wouldn't hurt to make it available for everybody, but if you don't want to clutter the view for all the students, you could make it available for only the specific students that have made it available. You can do the same thing with groups. One of the things that we get questions more often is, how do we create groups and what are they good for? They don't necessarily have to be used for group assignments. You could go ahead and manually enroll the students that are performing very well, students that are not performing so well, and students that need a lot of help. You could put them in groups that are either in the same in their same circumstance. You could put them in groups that are in the same circumstance, and they could help each other out, or you could have them see the specific feedback for those type of students. So if a student that's not performing very well could get additional reminders that their assignments are due, right? Like you have 2 weeks before the major paper, you could have an adaptive release for a item somewhere in their class when a student might be scrolling down, and 2 weeks before the paper is due, you could have an adaptive release that opens a warning. Hey, make sure you are working on your paper. Contact me if you need some help. And since you don't want to do it for every student, you could just do it for that specific group or group of students. So those are options you can keep in mind to make Blackboard work on your behalf and that of students. The other thing that we talked about is gating content in Blackboard. We already covered that in the learning materials. We have week 1, and the students cannot advance to week 2 without having a discussion and some grades from the previous week. You can also do that by requiring them that instead of having a quiz that is one attempt and done, you could have them take the same quiz until they get a 90 or higher. That ability to retake a quiz wouldn't have to be worth a big amount of points, especially if you're going to allow them to do multiple attempts. But that ability to do more than one attempt until they show some proficiency or mastery over the subject can increase their ability and retention of all the knowledge that they're learning in class, and allow you to make sure that nobody's falling behind, because most of the time everything that you're teaching in your class is connected. So if the students are not understanding things the previous week and they're forced to move on equally as fast as the top student in your class, they're going to end up with problems at the end of the semester. So that is something that's worth keeping in mind. So that concludes, for the most part, our discussion on the subject of adaptive release. It allows you to customize your course to meet the specific needs of students. It allows you to select how you want to display the content. It has some rules that can still be modified quite a lot, and especially with the combination of more than one rule, you can have ways of gating content that is not just, okay, do a discussion, get an attempt on it, and that lets you see the assignment, right? Because if a student is not doing very well in those discussions, they might not be learning a lot. So you could have multiple requirements. The student did well in the discussion, the student reviewed material, the student also participated in another assignment and did really well on it, And that assignment could be the quiz I mentioned. And if that's the case, then they can move on to the next section, to the next chapter. So we are here for technical support. If you have any questions that I might not have answered during this session, by all means, give us a call, and we'll be more than happy to help. So this has been another Blackboard Clinic. Until next time.